This video is brought to you by Manscaped. Stick around to hear more about their special offer for the entire Upper Echelon community. Alright, now that the discourse has kind of cooled off, level heads have seemingly prevailed, in a way, and the audience has been able to digest what exactly it was that they were given with Amazon's The Rings of Power, I wanted to put my own thoughts out there and basically discuss why Amazon and Warner Brothers are destroying a multi-decade legacy and polluting what is, in my eyes, one of the greatest fictional properties of all time. To be clear, this isn't really a review of the Amazon TV show. I will absolutely mention a number of things about it that highlight the absurdity and poor quality, as well as summarize a series of choices that contradict the writer's own stated mission. Pretty obvious to me that they set out with a goal and actually accomplished that goal while pretending that it was a completely different goal in the process. But my sole purpose here isn't to just produce another TV show sucked and was bad type video, because yeah, anyone with a brain already knows it. This is the crux of the issue. Rings of Power, despite many claims to the contrary and wishes that it were not true, Rings of Power is now the most recent and most high-profile piece of work that exists under the franchise banner of Tolkien. Like it or not, this is Lord of the Rings now when you enter the term in Google, surf media sites, or engage with the world in almost any online space. For a simple comparison, and one that I think a lot of people will be able to identify with, think of Spider-Man. Spider-Man is a very interesting cinematic property because you basically get three different generational sequences. There are, as of right now, three major film adaptations that exist in a somewhat isolated state independently. Obviously not fully, but you'll see what I mean in just a second. First is Tobey Maguire, the original Spider-Man franchise, as I like to call it, in 2002, 2004, and 2007, was a widely beloved story arc that was embraced by millions of people. It was hugely successful, cultivated an enormous following of fans, and maybe you have individual gripes with one or more of those films separately on a personal level, but the fact remains that Spider-Man was Tobey Maguire during that particular period of time. Next came Andrew Garfield. I didn't personally like these films as much, not even close, and almost didn't even pay attention to them, but for a lot of younger viewers, this was now Spider-Man when it came out. Tobey Maguire was a thing of the past, a relic of prior filmmaking that didn't have as many special effects, and this new, better, more modern Spider-Man was the real version to them. After that, and the most recent series of films, was Tom Holland, and I personally do very much like his performance as Spider-Man, easily understanding why he is so popular, but again, for me, the real Spider-Man, and the first image that comes to mind whenever those words are spoken, is Tobey Maguire. Here's the thing though, if you ask different groups of people who is Spider-Man, they will often answer different things. Anyone my age or older, the answer is probably going to be Tobey Maguire, but for younger viewers, it would be Andrew Garfield or Tom Holland especially. That's not intrinsically bad per se, it just indicates that there is a shifting perception with regards to who represents or what piece of entertainment represents a particular franchise, based on what the most recent product from that franchise happens to be. Another great example would be Batman. For me, Batman is Christian Bale. Hands down, that's just how it is. And the Joker is Heath Ledger. But for younger viewers, Batman is Ben Affleck, or maybe even now Robert Pattinson. I don't dislike these new adaptations and actors. They're fine, acceptable, whatever, and I do watch the movies when they come out. But the real Batman, to me, will always be Christian Bale, just based on when I watched it, how much I enjoyed it, my age, etc., etc. Hopefully this makes sense, because it applies here and now to Lord of the Rings, especially, even if that application is a little bit more abstract. Basically, Rings of Power is the newest transition from a prior normative acceptance of what the property is or was, and that transition has been painful, ultimately seeming like it may just be outright killing the future of this once great universe. Alright, video sponsor time, and once again, it's Manscaped. Focused on intelligent functionality, Manscaped provides a wide array of products to choose from, centering on their highly developed Lawnmower 4.0. It's cordless, waterproof, has interchangeable blade guards, and a wireless charging feature, making this the most advanced iteration of their signature product yet. Everything from enhanced battery life, convenience-based LED, and travel lock features as well to stop it from going off in your suitcase, pocket, or backpack. But wait, there's more. And actually, there is a lot more. Manscaped has a brand new offering called the Ultra Smooth Package. All products are sulfate and paraben free, as well as vegan, if that's something that you prioritize. This new package contains crop gel, which is clear for increased precision while shaving, exfoliator, and the cartridge shaver itself with multiple extra precision blades, which are extremely good at preventing ingrown hairs, and that's something I find to be a high priority. There's a very good reason that 6 million men worldwide trust Manscaped as their one and only hygiene option. If you want a special discount for the entire community, you can use the link down below and code UPPER at checkout for 20% off and free international shipping. Again, link down below and code UPPER at checkout for 20% off and free international shipping. Big thank you to Manscaped for sponsoring the channel. Let's elaborate a little bit further, but to do this, we need Nielsen data. According to estimates from data analytics firm Nielsen, very popular and well known for analyzing different film franchises or TV shows, Rings of Power was struggling very, very badly with a younger audience. At the midway point of the first season, remember they are already committed to 5 seasons, I think, of this, which will cost in excess of $1 billion. 71% of the audience was age 35 or older. That is wildly atypical for a mainstream fantasy series, but it gets worse. Compare this to House of the Dragon and you start to see why. Competing fantasy universe, same time frame, relatively speaking, similar audience, one would assume at least, but House of the Dragon had 68% of its entire audience in the 18 to 49 range. Obviously, this is imperfect as a comparison, and maybe it could still be heavily skewed to the older side of that range, thus coming closer to what we see from Rings of Power. But it's very obvious that even if we are as charitable as humanly possible here, Rings of Power is not connecting with younger viewers to any meaningful degree. And there's a pretty simple reason why. It sucks. Okay, I'm kidding. Sort of. It does suck, but that's not the main reason. This gap is occurring because people 35 and over, let's say 35 to 50 or 60, would have been right in the prime category of viewers who were captured by the Peter Jackson film trilogy. The books came out in the mid-1950s, I think, and the movies came out in early 2000, meaning that a huge number of people went from a popular book series over the course of a few decades that they read to a modern adaptation of those books, which was widely beloved. Sure, the Tolkien estate expressed dissatisfaction to a degree with the Peter Jackson film trilogy. Bet they fucking regret that now with what they allowed to happen during Rings of Power. But lore discrepancies and creative allowances aside, the film series on top of the books in that time frame created an entire generation of Tolkien fans. Rings of Power? Yeah, Rings of Power is being carried, quite obviously, by that same generation of fans, and it isn't picking up new ones. While simultaneously requiring that old guard of Tolkien fans for its moderate success in terms of raw viewer numbers, it's not wildly successful, it's moderately successful at best, it is spitting in their face. And it does this while failing to gather a new generation of viewers, like Spider-Man or Batman has done. What does this mean for the future of the property? It means that the most recent and high-profile piece of work, it's the most expensive show in human history, and it's ass-backwards horrible, is basically snubbing and pissing off the now majority above age 35 audience. Actually, the super majority, who are the ones invested in this world to begin with. And one final thing, people above 35 often have children. Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power could have been a passing of the torch. It could have been a scenario where the real Lord of the Rings cinematic experience was always the Peter Jackson films, like real in air quotes there. But this new show was kind of okay too. It could have been a generational shift occurring where the older fans watched it, they were okay with it, and it gathered a youthful audience while the planet just kept spinning. But instead, it alienated a massive number of the people whom it needed in order to find success, didn't expand its fan base, hardly at all, in a meaningful way, and that was season 1 of a 5-season arc where this will become the mainstream image for Lord of the Rings. Like it or not, it's going to happen. It won't be the right image, or the image accepted by true fans, but as the years go by, Rings of Power will become what people see when introduced to Tolkien for the first time, propped up by Amazon, who has more money than God. And that sad reality will pollute the legacy of this property to a degree that I don't think people really have yet realized. Unless they just completely redo their approach, fire most of the actors, fire the showrunners, fire all of the writers for that matter, and start over. Here's an explanation, rapid fire, why a lot of this has happened. For starters, the creators of this show, out one side of their mouth, were claiming that the series is deeply rooted in existing lore, but at the same time, Amazon fired eminent Tolkien scholar Tom Shippey for basically warning the showrunners every week that they were fucking the entire thing up and polluting the lore. Great start. Deeply rooted in the lore as you fire the most qualified person alive for telling you that you are doing a shitty job. Amazing. Next, the acting is horrible. Showrunners claim that the sexual tension between Galadriel and Halbrand is some sort of accident, but Morfydd Clark and Charlie Vickers, the two actors behind the characters, according to Vickers in numerous interviews, had what's called chemistry testing or chemistry casting in Hollywood multiple times, where they read the script together before getting the role or while they're being casted, because the relationship between those two characters is so important, and the casting director needs to see that they will do it properly. Yeah, some accident that was. Going off script here, Queen Muriel, she also does a role in Spartacus, the TV show, with like excessive blood and gore and just really over-the-top action scenes. And ever since I saw her in Spartacus, I mean, this is a personal thing. Not everybody has to agree with this take. But ever since I saw her in Spartacus, like, she is the most infuriating, horrible character in that show. And I'm starting to see that that's not necessarily because of the writing. That might be just the way that she portrays characters. So in Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, yeah, I can't unsee that, or you can't unring the bell. Like, I already have that impression of her, so that contributes. Again, totally personal. That's not something that everybody's going to mirror or echo or even feel. But that definitely that had a big impact for me. Also, just, this is actually very important. Galadriel is the one, according to the lore, who is the most suspicious of Sauron in the actual universe, right? According to the real story. So they completely screwed that up in what can only be described as a deliberate way. And the issues run so deep I could talk about problems with the show for hours. None of it makes any sense. Galadriel will literally just walk away from people burning alive for no reason after a village gets hit with pyroclastic whatever flow and she should be dead. But she'll walk away from people actually screaming and dying on the ground, right in front of her, to lead a kid who was looking for his mom, and now what? I don't know. He met Galadriel, so who needs to look for mom? To lead him through the woods alone, just so that they can have a little bit of dialogue exposition. It's brain dead. The number of tropes here, tropes that don't even need to be there, with just a tiny bit of critical thinking, is staggering. And what is almost the worst thing of all, despite being pretty small, is how a leaf falls down, a Balrog wakes up that shouldn't be awake, and that's the only time we see the Balrog in the whole show, in the whole season. Another thing that I have to add in here, I frequently have been breaking script on this one. I just have a lot to say about it. So Sauron in reality, in the Tolkien lore, is this massively intelligent evil presence who is a manipulator, the Lord of Gifts. He's, controlling people, deceiving people. And he has this kind of overarching agenda. He manipulates the elves, having to do with the rings. Like, he's doing a lot of this stuff that it's all by design. He has a grand master plan. He is almost the omnipotent evil. But in the show, in the Rings of Power, they've basically turned him into this guy that wants to be left alone, and Galadriel won't let him be left alone. If you really think about it and watch it, the message that they're portraying is that she meets Sauron on the raft, which he cannot possibly have known, right? She goes and decides to yeet herself into the ocean to swim across the whole Sundering Sea for no reason, because she just decides, I'm going to swim it. I'm going to go home. And he's there on a raft, which he couldn't have planned. She connects with him, and then when they go to Numenor, he just wants to stay there. He just wants to stay there and smith his little things. Like, this is not some grand plan. She drags him along over and over and over across the sea, over here, over there, brings him, and she turns him into Sauron. That's what they've written here. That Galadriel basically is the causing effect behind Sauron being an angry evil lord. It's unbelievable to me that it is this badly written and this horribly disrespectful to what was already a good story, with good story beats and points and, very, very compelling reasons why characters are the way that they are and all these different things. And it just takes all of it and cheapens it to a degree where, some college kid on Tumblr could have written a show that was this good. I mean, the comparisons that say this is fan fiction are extremely accurate. They have no respect for the existing fans. But existing fans are the only ones really watching in any meaningful number, clearly based on audience demographics. The only reason that hooks like the Balrog exist is to try and ensure that more people watch season 2. It's the only reason it's there. They manufacture story arcs that aren't just wrong or badly made. They make things up that are basically offensive to the original universe, like the Galadriel Sauron thing. She is the one that distrusts him, and yet they say, oh, it's an accident. We didn't mean to have sexual tension between them. But there is, and they had co-casting and chemistry tests, so how is that really an accident? You scripted the scenes in where they get really close and look into each other's eyes longingly, you did that on purpose, so don't try and say it's an accident. And if you really look at who the show was made for, the answer is no one. It's not for seasoned Tolkien fans, and that's the main audience right now. It's not for people new to the Tolkien universe either, because it systematically uses tiny little bits of lore and obscure references, which they get wrong half the time, like even name prefixes, with a disjointed narrative pace. And anyone in the middle, not an expert but not a newbie, either doesn't know enough to understand why it sucks this bad, they just know it does, or knows too much and sees the pig with lipstick for what it is. One group knows that they're kissing a pig with lipstick. The other group knows that the kiss is fucking terrible. They just can't tell that it actually is a pig. What's the result? The group that can't really tell why, but just knows the show is garbage in their hearts, stops watching or never picked it up to begin with. The people who can tell why and articulate it hang on for dear life because of their decades-old love for the world of Tolkien that existed long before this show. But how long will that realistically last? Right now, Warner Brothers, I mean, this is just, the icing on the cake, if you will, is releasing Lord of the Rings NFTs because that's the way to rekindle interest in a beloved property. Bastardize it with one of the most pathetic concepts to attract one of the most brain-dead communities, the NFT bros, in modern memory. Even mainstream media outlets have finally begun to acknowledge this failure. It's not really a consensus yet, per se, because admitting that this show was actually terrible will force one to sequentially admit that diversity casting isn't always beneficial and revolutionary, and girl boss story parameters don't actually make the narrative good necessarily, but the tides are shifting as people wake up and realize, wow, I'd rather be doing literally anything else other than watch this TV show. On the one hand, maybe it forces Amazon to course correct. I hope so, but it seems unlikely. If they don't, the audience the show does have will leave. There is not a new generation of fans being created by this work to take the helm or pick up the slack or the reins, and yet it will become the most recent example of Tolkien with a massive budget, and the on-ramp for younger viewers will narrow to a point where only the most shallow, surface-level viewers will actually stay connected, or the ones who spend the entire show on their phones and don't even actually watch the content at all. Relegating this to a level where its effect on the world it was born from, right, the Tolkien universe, is nothing short of catastrophic. I would honestly, and a big shout out to anyone who actually gets this reference or knows about this, but I would honestly, with no exaggeration whatsoever, unironically say that The Legend of the Seeker is a superior show. Look it up. Budget was 1.5, I think, million per episode, and it's not as flashy. The budget was way lower, the special effects, whatever, but it is genuinely superior as a holistic work of fantasy. Rings of Power takes everything nuanced and bashes it over the head till there's nothing left. It takes every single, here's an example. Halbrand, who was obviously Sauron the entire time, will say things he'll say things that make no sense if you don't know anything about Tolkien lore, but if you do know something about Tolkien lore, it's so on the nose and bashing you over the head with it that you just absolutely know who he is from the first second that you meet him. And there's no question, right? So it doesn't make any sense. It just, they've removed everything good about Tolkien in this show. So it pretends that none of the rules or creative considerations from Tolkien that made it amazing exist, which turns it from a series with potential, right? When I first saw the trailer, I was like, oh, this has potential, and a very, very large budget, to a historic failure that feels so contrived and inauthentic, you almost physically cringe and can't watch the show. It was carried by one of the most beloved names in Hollywood history, but with the trajectory it's on right now, that love will not last long. The audience will leave, and there's no one else standing by to take their place. Rings of Power is legitimately one of the worst television shows or series or whatever that I've ever seen in my life. I'm not trying to exaggerate and be, it's so terrible, and it's actually not. It is that bad. It is one of the worst things I've ever seen. And I pray to God that every single writer of this show is fired, so that someone with even a shred of creative integrity or knowledge of the lore, because I guess they have knowledge of the lore, they're just deliberately running against it for what? Political reasons? I don't know. They're trying to send a message to their toxic fans. Beats me. But please, someone with a shred of creative integrity, decency, and self-respect, take the wheel. Please. Here's to hoping, but don't hope too much. That's it. If you want to support, there are links down below. I guess it did turn into another show bad type video, but yeah, I mean, the demographic analytics speak for themselves. It's going to be a long road for this one. Primarily locals and Patreon linked down below. There will be holiday merchandise soon as well, special upper echelon t-shirts. Here's a sample of one design we're thinking for it. But yeah, that's it. I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.